There's breaking news in Italy to such an extent that it will be devastating for the Camorra. After spending 26 years in prison, Francesco Schiavone, considered to be the top Camorra boss, has begun cooperating with law enforcement. His decision to do so comes not only as a surprise to the authorities, but sent shockwaves throughout the mafia. The Camorra was formed by Rafael Cotolo in the 1970s, but the organization's origins date back to the 17th century. Schiavone led the Casalesi clan in Naples since 1988, when the clan's founder, Antonino Bartolino, was reportedly killed in Brazil. And I'll get more into that in a moment. Let me just say, this is another story with many twists and turns, so bear with me. Schiavone was serving several life sentences for multiple murders, which involved fighting that took place for control with other clans during the 80s and 90s. He was convicted on June 19, 2008, at the famous Spartacus trial, which actually was a series of trials of the Casalesi clan that began in 1988 and ended in 2008. Schiavone and his clan was considered the most powerful of the Camorra. They made an extremely large amount of money in Italy and abroad with prostitution, drug trafficking, construction, wellness centers, etc. The clan controlled shipping ports in Italy and clothing stores in countries like Ireland, Spain, Finland, the Netherlands, where they would sell knockoff clothing as the real deal and at full cost. At one time, Schiavone was considered one of Europe's richest criminals, with a net worth of 47 billion. During one raid at his house, 15 million in euros was seized, and the furniture inside the house was all gold and silver leaf. For the most part, Schiavone for the past 26 years didn't seem to miss his former lifestyle or his freedom. And up until about 2 weeks ago, he was housed in a prison in northern Italy. But prison authorities spread a rumor that he was suffering from a cancerous tumor. But it was just a ruse to get him to L'Aquila prison, where he was placed in the same 41 bis unit that Matteo Messina Denaro was held before his death. Schiavone is locked up 23 hours a day with no contact with other inmates. Before the news broke of his cooperation, Italian law enforcement went to Schiavone's relatives to offer them protection. They rejected the offer. Schiavone has 5 sons. In 2018, his son Nicola also began cooperating, as well as his son Walter in 2021. A third son, Emmanuel, is scheduled to be released on parole this August, and a fourth son, Carmine, still remains in prison, as well as Ivanhoe. Schiavone and his Casalesi clan have a shaky history with the well-known author Roberto Saviano, who wrote the book Camorra in 2006. Saviano gathered the information for the book by speaking with legitimate and illegitimate people who were under the Camorra's control. He also worked in several Camorra-run companies and factories in an undercover role to gather information. According to Saviano, the Camorra controls what can only be described as a global supply chain. They don't just sell drugs, arrange contract killings, or influence politics. They use legitimate and semi-legitimate business ventures to control markets around the world. Their pervasive influence makes them deadlier than other well-known criminal organizations, including the Sicilian Mafia. Naturally, when Saviano first published the book in March of 2006, the Camorra was not too pleased, and Saviano began living under police protection since October 2006. Then on December 23, 2006, Saviano denounced the Camorra, specifically the Casalesi clan bosses, by mentioning their names, starting with Schiavone. He said the following: "Go away. You don't belong here. Stop being part of this place. We will kick you out. You're nothing." Consequently, the clan planned to kill Saviano. Law enforcement became aware of the threat on Saviano's life from Carmine Schiavone, Francesco's cousin, who was cooperating with law enforcement. At the time, Carmine Schiavone confessed to over 50 murders. In October 2008, Roberto Saviano left Italy for good after spending 2 years living under around-the-clock protection by a police paramilitary unit. Living that way became too much for Saviano. "I want a life. I want a home. I want to fall in love. I want to be able to drink beer in public, go to a bookshop, go for a walk, enjoy the sun, walk in the rain, and see my mother without fear and without frightening her. I'm only 28 years old, for fuck's sake." And thankfully for his sake, he now gets to do those things. I mentioned earlier how Schiavone took control of the Casalesi clan following the death of Antonino Bartolino, who was allegedly killed in Brazil. Bartolino's death is said to have taken place on March 26, 1988, at a beachside resort in Rio de Janeiro. It was believed he was killed by his former friend, Mario Iovine, who supposedly knocked on Bartolino's front door, and when he opened it, Iovine beat him to death with a billhook, which is used a lot in Italy for pruning grapevines. Iovine then buried Bartolino's body on the beach. Although his body has never been discovered, the area where he was allegedly put was dug up, and the only remains found belonged to a black guy. At the time, following his arrest in Barcelona, Bartolino managed to get bail while he was a fugitive and wanted for arms trafficking and murder. Iovine told associates the story of Bartolino's death was fabricated and that Bartolino faked his death to ensure the survival of the Casalesi clan and, more importantly, his ability to live out his life in freedom. In 1991, Iovine was killed while making a phone call in a phone booth in Portugal. While in Brazil, Bartolino once shared a house with Tommaso Buscetta. And although Buscetta always denied his involvement with drugs, he and Bartolino were partners in the drug trafficking business. In 1981, when the Coglianesi declared war on the Palermo bosses, Dottorina had Michele Greco, who headed the commission, relay a message to Lorenzo Nuvoletta, a Camorra boss. The message was that Reina wanted Bartolino to kill Buscetta in Brazil. Bartolino was not only a friend and business partner of Buscetta, but had a history with Palermo bosses Stefano Bontante and Salvatore Inzerillo, who by the time the message was sent, the Coglianesi killed. Bartolino's reply to the message was no, that he wasn't doing it, which in itself was an act of war and created enemies with the Coglianesi and Nuvoletta. In 2003, a child's birth certificate stated the father's name as Marco Bartolino Diana. The child's mother was Bartolino's ex-wife. An investigation took place, and it was discovered that Marco Bartolino Diana didn't exist. What was also discovered was that Diana was the maiden name of Bartolino's mother. Following this incident, 2 other children made requests to change their surnames to that of Bartolino. In the mid-2000s, according to witnesses, Bartolino attended the wedding of one of his sons. There's also been speculation of him living in Paraguay in or about 2017, where he was spotted on a yacht and supposedly involved in several fishing companies. It's also believed he had cosmetic surgery, specifically on his nose. In 2019, Bartolino's brother Silvio was picked up on a recorded line telling his nephew, Bartolino's son, "Say hello to Dad." There are many indications that point to Bartolino being alive and not being killed in May of 1988, all except one. The theory that he faked his death so that his clan could succeed didn't make a whole lot of sense. More than likely, he faked his death so he didn't have to worry about law enforcement. But when news of his death reached the clan, immediately that same day, they strangled Bartolino's nephew and possible successor. In February 2022, Gustavo Bartolino, another nephew, was ambushed and almost killed. During the investigation into the shooting, law enforcement discovered an underground bunker in an apartment in Formia, Italy. That apartment in the past belonged to Antonino Bartolino. At the time, the apartment was linked to Bartolino's family, who settled in the area in 1990. Inside the bunker was only a bench and a light, a temporary shelter that could be used for a few hours at the most. Francesco Schiavone's cooperation comes to the relief of many and those waiting over 30 years to get some answers and the truth. The fate of Antonino Bartolino, in particular, his cooperation could open the doors to the relationship between the Camorra and politicians. Let me take a quick second to mention the super thanks icon found beneath this video for those of you who'd like to show your appreciation for videos like this one. I'll end with something Tommaso Buscetta had said when he was being questioned in 1992. Buscetta was questioned about the death of Antonino Bartolino, and one of the answers he gave was as follows: "And who decided that Bartolino was dead?"